At 4 in the morning, the knock on the motel door sounded like bad news, but not yet like the kind that would put a young woman under the ground. Barbara Jane Mackle was 20 years old, sick with the Hong Kong flu, and staying with her mother at a motel in Decatur, Georgia, before heading home to Florida for Christmas break from Emory University. When the voice outside said there had been a traffic accident and that a police officer needed to speak with them, the story sounded urgent enough to open the door. The man who stepped inside was not a police officer. He was Gary Stephen Christ, armed and disguised, with Ruth Eisenman Shear beside him. Within moments, the room turned into a crime scene. Jane Mackle was overpowered and restrained. Barbara was taken at gunpoint. By sunrise on December 17, 1968, she was no longer in the motel and already on her way to one of the most claustrophobic kidnapping ordeals in American history. Barbara's mother later became part of what made the opening feel so brutal. She had opened that door thinking some other young person might be hurt in a crash. Instead, she was left bound in the room while her daughter vanished into the dark. The contrast was immediate and cruel. Ordinary holiday travel on one side of the door, a meticulously planned abduction on the other. Christ had prepared for it. After forcing Barbara into a vehicle, he drove her to a remote wooded area in Gwinnett County, northeast of Atlanta. There, he had already buried a fiberglass reinforced box beneath the ground. It was coffin-like in size and shape, built just large enough to hold a human body with almost no room to move. The box had provisions meant to keep a captive alive long enough for a ransom deal to work. Water, some food, a battery-powered lamp, and ventilation through pipes running up to the surface. But alive in that setting did not mean safe. It meant trapped underground in darkness, unable to stand, unable to escape, and unable to know whether the people who buried you planned to come back at all. Christ put Barbara into the box, closed the lid above her, and buried her under the Georgia earth. Back above ground, the kidnappers moved quickly to turn terror into money. Barbara's father, Robert Mackle, was a wealthy Florida developer, and the kidnappers demanded a ransom of $500,000. The amount was enormous for the time. The family and the FBI had no real choice but to follow the demands while also trying to identify who had taken her and where she had been hidden. The first ransom attempt broke down when police activity disrupted the exchange and the kidnappers abandoned their car. That mistake mattered. The FBI recovered evidence from the vehicle and began working outward from the fake identities tied to it. Agents learned that George Deacon was actually Gary Stephen Christ, an escaped convict, and that Ruth Eisenman Shear had helped execute the plan. Even with those names, Barbara was still buried somewhere in Georgia, and every hour mattered more than the last. Down in the box, time did not move normally. Barbara later described trying to keep herself under control by focusing on practical things instead of panic. She had a fan system feeding air through the pipes, but she could hear when the mechanism changed or weakened. At one point, the battery-powered pump failed and she felt the air grow worse, forcing her to fight fear in a space already tight enough to turn every breath into work. Water seeped into the box. The lamp did not last. Once the light was gone, the darkness became total. She could not sit up straight. She could not stretch. She could only lie there, wait, think, and guess whether it was day or night. Barbara later said she screamed at first, then understood screaming would not save her. What kept her going was the decision to believe she would be found. Above ground, the case exploded into national news. Investigators knew they were not just looking for a hostage in a moving car or a hidden room. They were looking for a buried box somewhere across a wide area of winter ground. On December 20th, after the ransom had been paid, Christ telephoned the FBI and gave vague directions to the burial site. The directions were not clean enough to lead agents straight to Barbara, but they were enough to narrow the search into the Lawrenceville area. The Bureau flooded the region with personnel from Tampa, Miami, and Atlanta. Men spread out across wooded land and fields, listening, probing, digging, and trying to turn incomplete directions into a life-saving location. By that point, Barbara had been underground for more than 3 days. She was dehydrated, cold, filthy, and running out of certainty about how much longer the box would hold air. Then she heard something. At first it was faint, then clearer. Movement above her, voices, the impact of tools and hands tearing into the soil. The rescue did not arrive gently. Agents and searchers clawed through the dirt as fast as they could. When they finally broke through, daylight came down into the box after more than 80 hours of confinement. Barbara was pulled out alive on December 20th after roughly 83 hours underground. She was weak and badly shaken, but she was alive. The hunt for the kidnappers was not over. Christ and Eisenman Shear had escaped the ransom exchange, but now they were the targets of a massive manhunt. Both were placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, and Eisenman Shear became the first woman ever added to it. Tampa agents soon received a tip that Christ was hiding in mangrove country off Florida's Gulf Coast. Agents were helicoptered into swampy ground and searched through dangerous water and brush until roadblocks and pursuit finally closed in on him near Hog Island. He was captured with ransom money and property bought with it. Eisenman Shear stayed free longer, but she was arrested in Norman, Oklahoma in March 1969. What made Barbara Mackle's survival story endure was the physical reality of what she endured minute by minute. She was sealed away beneath the ground in a box designed to keep her alive, just long enough to make her valuable. Every element of the case reduced her world further. The motel room that became the point of abduction, the car ride into the dark, the descent into the box, the lid closing, the dirt piling over her, the light failing, the air changing, the waiting stretching past one day and then another, and then another. The case terrified people because it stripped survival down to breath, endurance, and the hope that searchers could read vague directions before the time inside the box ran out. Barbara later helped tell the story in the book 83 Hours Till Dawn. But even without later retellings, the ordeal had already fixed itself in the national memory. She had been taken from a motel room in the pre-dawn dark, hidden in the earth, used as leverage in a ransom plot, and recovered alive only after a desperate search. Her survival did not make the case less brutal. It made it more unforgettable, because the rescue happened after the kind of confinement most people cannot imagine enduring for even minutes, let alone more than 3 days. For horrifying survival stories, Barbara Jane Mackle's case remains one of the clearest examples of a person surviving not only a kidnapping, but the suffocating logic of a plan built to reduce a human being to a hidden object underground. She lived through it because the box held, because the searchers found the right patch of earth in time, and because, while buried in darkness, she refused to let panic have the last word. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.